You're listening to The Pulse on AMI Audio. I'm Grant Hardy. Every year, starting on the last Sunday in May, Canadians celebrate National Accessibility Week. This was founded as National Access Awareness Week in 1988 and was inspired by Rick Hansen's Man in Motion World Tour. This week celebrates the valuable contributions and leadership of Canadians with disabilities and also highlights the work of people and organizations that are working to remove physical and attitudinal barriers and create a more accessible Canada. Let's find out how the Rick Hansen Foundation is celebrating National Accessibility Week by joining Matthew Shaw, Head of Accessibility Practice at Rick Hansen Foundation. Matthew, first of all, welcome to The Pulse, and I was wondering if you could introduce yourself, describe your role a little bit at Rick Hansen Foundation and what you do.
Hi, Grant. Happy National Accessibility Week. It's great to be with you. I am Matthew Shaw. I'm the head of accessibility practice at the Rick Hansen Foundation. And my work is really focused around the principle of treating accessibility not only as the overcoming of barriers or transcending limitations, but of finding ways to live ingeniously. And the many ways that Canadians across the country are participating and celebrating that work this week, the work of the tremendous disability sector and the community. Our organization at the Rick Hansen Foundation was a legacy established after Rick completed his Man in Motion World Tour in 1985, where he traveled more than 40,000 kilometers from his wheelchair after sustaining a spinal cord injury to raise awareness and unite the global accessibility community in that shared mission. And so every year, National Accessibility Week is a great time to recognize and champion the great work that people with disabilities, the disability community, and those around the world are doing in support of raising awareness.
Accessibility is always critical, but it seems like an especially critical time now as we enter really uncharted political and social territory here. How do we make sure advocate for inclusion and accessibility to remain enshrined in our culture?
That's a great question, Grant. I mean, the winds of change are always circling our work. And so when it comes to bringing accessibility to the forefront and ensuring that it stays there, I often begin with a really simple idea, which is that everything we do as people is mediated through our bodies, through our minds. And yet that's really easy to forget, right? We so often, and if you take this lens and we look at the world around us, we'll see all of the things that we have designed and we have built and that we have created that has forgotten this really essential fact about humanity. And so when we're doing the work of accessibility, we're championing the rights of people with disabilities to participate fully in every aspect of community life. But this is also a fundamental, really important way at looking at how do we make sure in whatever our line of work and whatever we do, wherever we go, that we're being mindful that, human bodies and minds become in all different shapes and sizes and abilities. And how do we build that kind of world that harnesses the contributions of absolutely everyone in our shared mission of surviving and thriving in what more and more feels like a really chaotic world all around us.
Yeah, it's not a binary. When we look at bodies at all stages in life, it's just so clear that our we're ever changing. We're not going to have the same limitations forever. Everyone is going to have limitations at some point in their lives, and acknowledging that is really important. So National Accessibility Week, as you mentioned, celebrates overcoming barriers, but also just living ingeniously and having some fun as well. Hopefully, how is Rick Hansen Foundation celebrating National Accessibility Week?
Well, this is a big week for us, Grant. Every year we treat this as an annual milestone to really celebrate with the community the work that's being done across Canada and around the world in making the world a more accessible place. At the Rick Hansen Foundation, we work in a lot of different areas and we collaborate with many different organizations. One area that's very important and near to dear to us is the built environment. We live in a world where we have tons of complex infrastructure, and through no one's specific goal, that the built environment that we produce around us, however, does present barriers and continues to present barriers for people with disabilities. And so, this is an area we've been working in for a long time. And one of the
Mhm.
things we're doing this week to celebrate is we are launching the next edition of our Building Without Barriers Challenge, sponsored by BOMEX, in which we bring together and invite corporations, property managers, and facility managers from around the world to participate in evaluating building performance for accessibility, all in the name of creating a more accessible and inclusive built world around us. We also have a number of training opportunities and webinars and things where we're bringing the community together. Just this past Monday, we hosted a webinar with more than 600 attendees to celebrate disability inclusion within organizations. And so, specifically looking at the work that that employees within larger organizations are really approaching the task and the challenge of bringing accessibility messages, strategies, and tools like throughout organizations and building coalitions of support that we can then share in our wider work.
Yeah, employment, disability, employment, and inclusion is a really hot topic. And this is part of your Power of Inclusion series, specifically the Power of Championing Disability Inclusion panel. That is a huge attendance that you had too. So congratulations on that. And tell me a little bit more about this panel and just why it's so critical right now for the community.
That's a great question. Well, one thing that often happens when we look at the world of organizations and companies, of any institution, it's really easy when we're on the outside to think of them as a kind of monolith, right? Very self contained. But you get inside any organization, and even if you work in a very small organization, you will realize how complex and rich those relationships are within them. And every organization becomes it's its own kingdom. So I can take none of the credit for the webinar that we had last week,
Mhm.
earlier this week, because it was really a tribute to some of the guests and the representatives that we had with us in the different organizations that they are a part of. So including YVR Airport, Canadian Tire, Scotiabank, and KPMG. And so really kind of looking at what's it like when we're working in these environments, and how do we collectively build coalitions of support? How do we make sure that accessibility messages are being championed at a strategic level? And how are we finding ways in practice, in our daily work, whatever that area may be, how are we bringing accessibility considerations to that work so that we can scale and grow and champion that cause? And just as it might be when we're looking at the shifting winds of change in a macro
Mhm.
environment, what does this mean, right, when we're inside whatever our day-to-day life looks like, and how do we do that kind of work better?
It's actually very heartening to see big Canadian employers who are still interested in learning about inclusion and accessibility in the workplace. Um, but one thing that's interesting is the panel talked about how inclusion of people with disabilities in the workplace can promote innovative and successful workplaces. Now, hopefully, people can go back and watch this panel here, but maybe can you talk a little bit about that philosophy? Like, how can inclusion actually create a really innovative workplace?
That's a great question, Grant. Well, at the end of the day, whatever organization we're in, whatever sector we're in, we want to produce results. And to produce results, we need talent. We need strong, professional, qualified talent, and we need diverse perspectives and points of view, so that when we're around the table and doing our work, that whatever, whether we're in private or nonprofit, that the things that we are doing are reflective of our customers, or the people that we serve. And so we're in a talent crunch. There are all kinds
Mhm.
of competing demands for quality talent, And for organizations that, however unintentionally it may be, are shying away from disability employment, are really missing a crucial field to be able to bring talent into the organization that's really qualified. And and the many, not only just the perspective and lived experience that employees with disabilities have, but to our earlier point in this conversation, when we say
Mhm.
disability is about living ingeniously,
Mhm.
there are many different kinds of perspectives and approaches that people with disabilities can bring to these conversations, that are often missed, or that we don't explore. The challenge is, how do we, within organizations, whether we are people with disabilities or whether we are supporters and allies, how do we um, create the conditions and the pathways to effectively hire people with disabilities, to make sure that they're supported in the workforce and that their talents and their goals and their work are being utilized as fully as other employees. And this is an ongoing challenge. One of the things
Mhm.
I find myself speaking a lot about when I'm encouraging industries and business to adopt accessibility strategies is to look at how these tools can drive the metrics that are important to them. So making sure that there's a common North Star that's really guiding that work. And then the other thing that I really encourage people to do is, this is iteration. It's that we're not going to be perfect out of the box. We're not always
Mhm.
going to get the solution right, but we can't be afraid to iterate and change and grow and kind of bring new things in. And the more we do that, the more we're going to enrich our culture, and the better able we'll be able to deliver on the results that we seek.
Yeah, it's an interesting concern that when you look at a company who it doesn't ignore accessibility, they really try, but sometimes they make a mistake and they can get some really sometimes harsh feedback on that. And I think it can really increase the fear of like not leaving, not just going beyond ignoring accessibility. So I hope we can teach people to kind of like give people a chance who are trying. Mistakes happen everywhere. It doesn't have to be a huge dispute necessarily. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. There's also, if we're learning another language and we decide we're going to be proficient in another language, we have to practice the language. We're not going to
Yeah,
read
that's it.
our book or do our Duolingo app and emerge, fully fluent. And part of the ways that we develop that fluency is we have to do it with others. Um, and that really reflects an accessibility practice too. And the best ways to really do that is, like, how are we engaging people with disabilities? How well do we listen? How
Mhm.
well do we show that we hear and that we're responding and that we're checking back? It's the same as developing any other human relationship where,
Mhm.
we begin working and meeting with people. We want to understand their point of view. We want to understand our, where we have shared values and where things are different. And so, how do we do that in a way that gives us permission to do the work? One thing I find I say quite frequently these days is,
Mhm.
we are really fortunate with the time that we are in, because there's a tremendous opportunity. There's enormous headwinds, enormous challenges, shifting priorities. Absolutely. But we've never had a community that understands people with disabilities as well as we do now. We've never had as much corporate support. We've never had as much willingness. And a lot of this is grounded in the types of cultural change that have happened over the last 30 or 40 years,
Mhm.
in part to many trailblazers, including people like Rick Hansen, to bring this to the forefront and to raise those kinds of these attitudes and expectations. But where we're at now is really a moving from a why to a how, and making sure that we are in an era where everything is changing really fast. We need solutions, we need tools, we need to bring it into practice, and we need to do that a lot. And it's just really encouraging and providing space for any organization to do that work, and also to make sure that we're engaging and bringing people with disabilities into that and we're co-creating. But we are in a time now, things are changing so fast. For us to thrive and be successful, we need to utilize every tool that we have, and we need to see what works and then improve over time, and that applies to accessibility strategies just as much as anywhere else.
And speaking of those tools, those strategies, one thing that I really like about the Rick Hansen Foundation, both in terms of employment, in terms of schools, talking to schools, pretty much everything I think you do is moving beyond this philosophy of like, let's work on accessibility because it's the right thing to do, and instead moving on to a philosophy that actually sells the importance of talent with disabilities as an asset. Why was it important for you to adopt that little bit more of a positive philosophy, shall we say?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think a lot of our work and a lot of our attitude and our approach comes directly from the work of our founder, from the work of Rick Hansen and the original Man in Motion World Tour, and just how, as somebody who has seen it from afar, just how audacious a goal that really is, to really say we're going to set out in a direction and we want to build a movement of support around us, and we want to not propose to have all of the solutions, but we want to work in the spaces and bring together the people that do, and look for ways to facilitate that work and those connections. And I'm really pleased that the foundation has had the opportunity over the last 40 years to really be a part of so many of the transformative initiatives that are happening across Canada and around the world. But it's almost as gratifying to see the way that the disability community today, and the many organizations that work within it, the way that they're bringing solutions that go from the big picture and the governmental and the human rights point of view all the way down to service delivery, and what does this really look like in a day-to-day life, and how do I solve an accessibility problem wherever I am in whatever field that I'm in. And so we see our role, in addition to bringing and offering and growing programs and services that help support and do that. What we really want to do is help articulate and work with all of our stakeholders to identify what are these really big systemic problems. What would it look
Mm-hmm.
like if the world changed? And for us to be precise about that, and then to be able to say, how do we then bring together the tools, the networks, and the solutions and the people that help deliver that? And so we're really proud to be a part and to celebrate National Accessibility Week with the entire disability sector and the entire community across Canada, and to share in the good work that everybody's doing.
Just wanted to talk about this from the perspective of employment. Monday's panel here. What were some of the most interesting insights? Either impactful, helpful tips that the panelists provided, or some of the questions that were asked during the Q&A.
The discussion was extremely interesting. The A huge focus and a huge key message was, we have to keep our eyes on the prize. So when we're working in this accessibility space, we have to be able to ask ourselves, are we prepared? Do we have the right solutions and tools to do the work? Are we putting them into practice? And how well do we tell and share that story throughout the organization? And if organizational priorities change, as they always do,
Mm-hmm.
how do we make sure that we are continuing to build the work, connect it to the goals of our work, and then to build the right kinds of communities that bring that across organizations? And that looks really different in a lot of different places. In some In some organizations, we see strong employee resource groups and large corporations that really represent the accessibility point of view, and they act as traveling champions around the organization to help bring this into different teams and units. In other cases, it's about finding a strategic opportunity in the organization's overall set of priorities and really being able to concentrate and show we're going to do lots of local interventions here. We're going to try to build a body of work, and we're going to show what that work does, and we're going to show the impact that it has on the organization. And then then we're going to share and spread it further afield. We also talked a little bit about the fact that it's okay for us as a community to admit when things are challenging, and this is the kind of work we can't always go alone, right? We have to find those allies and those work. And one of those things that was interesting to me is that in some organizations, there is often a legacy and a history, or there is something somewhere in the work that is an accessibility champion. And sometimes we might be in an organization, think we can't see it, or we're starting from zero. But it was very interesting to hear from the speakers how often that isn't the case. And so one of the easiest ways for us to grow our impact and scale is like find where are those little places where we see glimmers of light or where we've seen success before, and then how can we kind of pick up that ball and carry it forward on behalf of our organization. So being consistent, finding some of these existing wins, building support, and connecting the work to the overall mission and purpose of the organization.
I don't mean to put you on the spot here. We're going to send people to watch the panel, but can you think of an example of something where a company might think, oh, we've never really had that light bulb moment of accessibility, but actually there has been something, some hope, some change in the past that we're just not seeing. Do you any example of what you mean by that?
Sure. Well, one example, particularly if we're working in an organization where maybe senior leadership is talking at a strategic level about accessibility, maybe it's working on its accessibility plan, it's trying to embed some of these commitments into the work, and the manager, the director who's working at that level actually doesn't know that the frontline customer service team who's taking calls from their customers or their clients on a daily basis, they actually encounter this on the front line regularly, and how to have better interactions and communications with employees. And sometimes this isn't happening in a very formal way. It may not be a case of we've brought in, say, customer service training, or that we've kind of issued a mandate from the top down. But if you go down and you do the work and you talk to the team, you'll find that they have, and sometimes undocumented, unwritten down, but they've actually developed a workflow, and they have examples and they have things to share. But maybe it doesn't make its way up the the reporting pipeline and the chain of command, because there's obviously so many things happening within an organization at one point in time. So it's just being able to learn and look for where those little gems are buried in the organization. And one of the spots they're very frequently found is in the people in the organizations that are working directly with the people that they serve on the front lines, and making sure that we bring that in.
It's such a good point. The frontline customer service is such a great asset. I remember I've definitely gone into big banks before as a blind consumer, and I think they've wondered, like, how is this going to work? And then I've ended up using the app, quicker than a lot of their other customers. So who knows? Maybe if that person becomes a hiring manager or some bigger role in the company, they might just hire someone who's blind. Yeah, amazing, and definitely being nice to those people on the front line.
It's a great example, Grant. It's a great example too of since we're talking about customer service, that hey, sometimes you go to a restaurant the meal's not that great, or you had
Mm-hmm.
some trouble getting there, but some really good concierge service and maitre d service can transform that experience and make it memorable, even when the chips are stacked against you.
Oh, 100%. And that's really cool. So thank you for sharing that. Um, just wondering, well, first of all, where can we go to watch the panel?
The best place to find all of our programming for National Accessibility Week and beyond is to visit us online at our website, www.rickhansen.com. And you can, there on that website, you'll find our National Accessibility Week resources and webinars and panel descriptions. You'll also find information on our programs and some of the areas that we're really working in deeply right now, related to how to make built environments and places and spaces more physically accessible. Our schools program has supported more than 4,000 schools across Canada, and raising awareness and building accessibility champions. There are tons of free resources on the website for educators. And we have, of course, been involved in the spinal cord injury and research area for a
Mm-hmm.
long time. And so if we have a wealth of resources online, and lots of content for people who are interested in bringing and sharing some of this work within their organizations.
And one quick other thing, why does National Accessibility Week resonate with you? What does it
It
mean to you
resonates
personally?
with me because I think it's really important that the work has to be seen to be done. And if we don't have a point in time where we really look at ourselves and evaluate how we're doing, we don't take a moment to celebrate our successes, and we don't take a minute to be honest and candid and forthright about where our gaps are and what we still need to do. I think that's really important. And I hope that National Accessibility Week continues to grow, not only as an opportunity for awareness and education and celebration, but where all of us who are working in this space can really evaluate and take stock of how well we're doing and what should we be doing in future, so that we're changing the experience of access around the country, and that every National Accessibility Week we're going just a little bit further.
And you guys have a busy week with more events still coming up. So, really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule, Matthew, to chat with us on the Pulse.
It's my pleasure, Grant. Have a great day.
Cheers. We really appreciate Matthew Shaw, Head of Accessibility Practice at the Rick Hansen Foundation, for joining us on the Pulse. The Pulse airs on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern on AMI Audio. You can also find the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Grant Hardy. Thanks so much for listening.